"She deliberately targeted your mother, sir." The woman hissed, her voice sharp with malice as she pointed at the tearful cleaner. Acted all innocent, hoping for a handout. These types always have an angle. The young cleaner flinched, cornered between the vicious accusation and the cold assessing gaze of the powerful CEO standing beside the elegant old lady. What had she done? The rhythmic squeak of Clara's cleaning cart was a familiar soundtrack to the pre-dawn chill. Its wheels glided over the polished marble floors of the lobby adjacent to the towering Hayes Corporation building, reflecting the cold artificial lights like captured stars. Clara moved with an efficiency born of routine, her hands tracing familiar paths with a damp cloth, erasing the smudges and footprints of yesterday. Inside her pocket, the thin fabric brushed against the folded electric bill, a stark reminder of looming deadlines and the ever-present weight on her shoulders. Her younger brother Leo needed new books for school soon. That thought, a persistent little nudge, momentarily overshadowed the lingering scent of disinfectant. She pushed it back, focusing on the next surface, the next task. Her own dreams, small and carefully tucked away, could wait. Suddenly the city outside seemed to hold its breath, then exhale in a rush of wind and water. Rain lashed against the tall glass doors, blurring the streetlights into watercolor streaks. It wasn't a drizzle, it was a downpour, arriving with theatrical intensity. And through that curtain of rain, Clara saw her, an older woman caught completely unprepared. She fumbled with an inside-out umbrella, her slight frame struggling against a sudden gust. Her clothes, though simple, a lavender cardigan over a modest dress, looked neat, but were quickly darkening with rain. She peered around, a look of bewildered vulnerability on her face, clutching a handbag to her chest as if shielding it from the deluge. Without a second thought, Clara propped her mop against the wall. She grabbed her own slightly battered but functional umbrella, leaning near the employee entrance, and pushed through the heavy glass doors. The wind snatched at her thin jacket, the cold rain instantly soaking her hair, but her focus was solely on the figure, huddled just a few feet away. "Here," Clara said, her voice warm, despite the chill holding the umbrella over the startled woman. "Come under the awning quickly." The woman looked up, her eyes, a surprisingly clear blue, widening first in surprise, then relief. Oh, thank you." Dear heavens, it came out of nowhere. Clara guided her the few steps back into the relative shelter of the building's wide entrance overhang. The rain hammered down just beyond them, a noisy grey sheet. "You're soaked," Clara observed gently, noticing the woman shivering slightly. "Are you all right? Were you waiting for someone?" The woman gave a small, rueful shake of her head, attempting to smooth her damp hair. "I was just trying to get my bearings." "My phone? Well, I suspect it's currently staging a rebellion. Decided to go completely black right when I needed directions." She sighed, but then a twinkle appeared in her blue eyes. "Honestly, at my age, I think these gadgets conspire against me, just for sport." Clara couldn't help but smile. There was a spark in the woman's voice, a touch of humor that belied her initial, frazzled appearance. "They can definitely have a mind of their own," she agreed. "Maybe it just needs a rest. We can wait here for the rain to ease up a bit." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the downpour. Clara felt a pang of sympathy. She reached into the worn canvas bag she carried her lunch in. Inside, nestled beside a small container of rice and beans, were 2 plain biscuits she'd saved for her mid-morning break. It wasn't much. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "It's not much," Clara said, holding one out. "But maybe something small while you wait. I have some tea in a thermos, too, if you'd like. It's still warm." Well, she thought, with a flicker of internal humor, it's not exactly afternoon tea at the Ritz, but it's warm. The older woman's gaze softened truly, looking at Clara, now taking in her simple uniform. Her kind eyes. "That is incredibly thoughtful of you, dear," she said, accepting the biscuit with a grateful smile that seemed to chase away some of the chill. "Thank you. My name is Evelyn. By the way, I'm Clara. It's nice to meet you, Evelyn, even if it's in the middle of a storm." They shared the simple snack. The warm, sweet tea from Clara's thermos passed between them. Evelyn asked Clara gentle questions about her work, listening with genuine interest that felt rare and comforting. Clara found herself talking more easily than she usually did with strangers, touched by the woman's warmth and unexpected wit. The rain began to soften, the furious drumming lessening to a steady patter. Just then, a sleek black car, impossibly clean despite the weather, pulled silently to the curb. The rear window remained tinted, obscuring the occupant, but a uniformed driver stepped out, holding a large, sturdy black umbrella. Evelyn's demeanor shifted subtly. The momentary vulnerability vanished, replaced by a quiet composure. "Ah, that must be my ride," she said, her voice regaining a touch of formality. She turned to Clara, her blue eyes sincere. "Clara, thank you again. Truly, you were a beacon in the storm. It was nothing, Evelyn. I hope you get home safe and warm." Clara replied, meaning it. Evelyn gave her hand a gentle squeeze before turning towards the car. The driver held the door, and she slipped inside without a backward glance. The car pulled away as silently as it had arrived, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. Clara watched it go, a strange mix of feelings swirling within her. The brief connection had felt significant somehow. She turned to head back inside, her gaze falling on the spot where Evelyn had been standing. Something small lay on the damp marble. Clara bent down and picked it up. It was an antique-looking hair comb made of dark carved wood, inlaid with a tiny, intricate mother-of-pearl flower. It felt smooth and cool in her hand. Clearly old and well-loved, Evelyn must have dropped it when she was flustered by the rain. Clara held the comb, looking from its delicate beauty to the imposing facade of the Hayes Corporation building next door, then back towards the now empty street where the expensive car had disappeared. Who was Evelyn? A kind, witty woman caught in the rain who rode in cars like that and carried combs like this. A tiny seed of curiosity took root, a quiet question mark hanging in the damp post-storm air. The next morning, the rhythmic squeak of the cleaning cart felt heavier, somehow less comforting than before. The memory of the sudden storm and the encounter with the kind, witty Evelyn lingered in Clara's mind, like the scent of rain on pavement. Tucked carefully into a small inner pocket of her worn bag was the antique hair comb. Its smooth, cool surface felt like a tangible piece of that strange, warm interlude. Every so often her fingers would brush against it, a secret reminder. She'd resolved to keep an eye out, hoping perhaps Evelyn might pass by, again giving her a chance to return the precious-looking item. Reality, however, had a way of asserting itself, and part of Clara's reality was Brenda, another member of the cleaning staff who worked a similar shift, possessed eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a tongue that often moved faster than her thoughts, or perhaps exactly in line with them. She approached Clara near the elevators, her own cart momentarily abandoned, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. "Morning, Clara." Brenda began, her tone deceptively sweet. "You seem a bit dreamy today. Still thinking about that downpour yesterday?" Clara offered a polite, non-committal smile. "Just concentrating on work." Brenda leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially, though her eyes scanned the sparsely populated lobby. "I saw you, helping that old woman by the entrance. Very charitable of you." The word charitable hung in the air, laced with something that wasn't quite admiration. Anyone important? Clara felt a prickle of unease. She just seemed lost and caught in the rain. She replied evenly, turning back to polish a brass railing, hoping to end the conversation. Lost. Brenda chuckled a dry, skeptical sound. Funny how the lost ones sometimes end up getting picked up by cars nicer than my entire apartment. She paused, watching Clara's reflection in the polished brass. Find anything good after she left. Sometimes those rich old birds drop things. Clara stiffened slightly, but kept her movements steady. I'm just focused on getting this lobby done. Brenda, we have the third-floor conference rooms next. Brenda's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Right, work. She pushed off the wall she'd been leaning against. Just be careful who you spend your time being charitable to Clara. Wouldn't want people thinking you're aiming higher than your mop bucket. The implied sneer lingered long after Brenda had moved away. Clara took a deep breath, pushing down the frustration. Why did kindness always seem suspect in Brenda's eyes? She carefully avoided touching the pocket where the comb rested. Miles away in a minimalist office overlooking the city skyline, Julian Hayes stared intently at a complex financial projection on his screen. The numbers swam before him, demanding focus, demanding decisions worth millions. His jaw was tight, his posture radiating the controlled energy of someone perpetually juggling immense pressure. The revised offer is unacceptable, he stated into the speakerphone, his voice crisp and final. Hold firm on our position. If they balk, we walk. Understood. A clipped affirmative came through the speaker. Julian disconnected the call, leaning back in his chair for a brief moment, rubbing his temples. His eyes flickered to the corner of his large monitor, where a small notification icon glowed persistently. A missed call, time-stamped from yesterday afternoon. Mum. He sighed a barely audible sound, and with a swift click cleared the notification without returning the call. There were more pressing matters, always more pressing matters. The brief thought of his mother likely fretting over some minor detail was quickly subsumed by the next urgent email demanding his attention. His world was one of high stakes, sharp edges, and very little room for personal distractions. Later, during her short lunch break in the sterile employee break room, Clara allowed herself to take out the wooden comb again, admiring the intricate inlay under the harsh fluorescent lights. It felt like something from another time, another world, Maria. A quieter colleague with kind eyes sat opposite her, unwrapping a sandwich. That's beautiful, Clara. Maria commented softly. Where did you get it? Clara hesitated, then decided a small part of the story was safe. I found it yesterday. I helped an older lady who got caught in the storm near the entrance, and she must have dropped it when her car came. She smiled faintly. She was actually quite funny, made a joke about her phone plotting against her. Maria chuckled. Sounds like my Aunt Sophia. It's nice you helped her. Hope you can return it. Me too, Clara murmured carefully, tucking the comb away again, just as Brenda walked into the break room, casting a quick, assessing glance their way. The easy moment vanished. The rest of the shift felt longer than usual. Clara found herself unconsciously glancing towards the main entrance of the Hayes building, more often than necessary, a faint, improbable hope fluttering within her. Could Evelyn possibly work there, or visit someone there? It was one of these stray glances that Brenda, lurking nearby while pretending to wipe down a wall display, noticed. Clara's gaze lingered for just a moment on the impressive glass facade of the Hayes Tower, the building synonymous with wealth and power in the city. Brenda sidled up to another cleaner down the hall moments later. See that she stage whispered, nodding towards Clara, who was now diligently cleaning the baseboards. Clara spends half her time daydreaming and the other half staring at the Hayes building. Mark my words. She's got some scheme cooking. Probably hoping Mr. Big CEO himself will sweep her off her feet after she helped that old lady yesterday. Some people just don't know their place. The malicious seed was planted, ready to sprout in the fertile ground of workplace gossip. Clara, oblivious to the immediate slander, but keenly aware of the chill that had descended upon her interactions with Brenda, finished her shift with a growing sense of unease. The simple act of kindness was casting a shadow she hadn't anticipated, and the mystery of Evelyn and her beautiful forgotten comb felt increasingly complicated. A few days passed. The city settled back into its rhythm, the memory of the sudden storm fading for most. But not for Evelyn Hayes. She found herself thinking often of the young woman Clara, whose simple act of kindness had been so unexpectedly warming. There was a genuineness about her, a quiet intelligence behind her polite demeanor that had struck Evelyn. Perhaps she admitted to herself, as she sat alone in her spacious, silent apartment. She was also a little lonely. Julian was always so consumed by work, their conversations brief and functional. Determined, Evelyn decided she wouldn't just wait for fate. She wanted to thank Clara properly, perhaps find a way to discreetly help her without causing offense. Knowing the approximate shift times from their brief chat, Evelyn dressed thoughtfully, still favoring comfort, but perhaps in a slightly more tailored coat, her silver hair neatly styled, and had her driver take her to the vicinity of the Hayes Corporation building during Clara's likely lunch break. She felt a small thrill of almost clandestine purpose. Clara was sitting on a cold stone bench in a small public plaza, just outside the main entrance, trying to enjoy the weak midday sun while eating her sandwich. The break room felt too confining today, too filled with Brenda's watchful eyes. She needed a moment of air. She looked up as a familiar figure approached, and her heart gave a surprised leap. Evelyn Clara exclaimed, standing up quickly, a wide, genuine smile lighting up her face. "I was hoping I might see you again." Evelyn's own smile was warm and immediate. "Clara, my dear, I was hoping the same." Clara reached into her bag. "I have something for you. You dropped this the other day, in all the commotion with the rain." She held out the antique wooden hair comb. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly, and she took it with a soft gasp. "Oh my goodness. My comb, I thought I'd lost it for good." She held it gently, tracing the mother-of-pearl inlay with her fingertip. "This was my mother's. Thank you so much, Clara. I can't tell you how much this means to me." The shared moment felt personal, a connection deepening beyond mere happenstance. "I'm just glad I could return it," Clara said sincerely. "You seem like a very resourceful young woman." Evelyn observed her gaze, kind but perceptive. It takes a certain strength to be so considerate when you're clearly working hard yourself. Clara felt a blush rise to her cheeks, unused to such direct, positive attention. "I just try to—" Her words were cut short. A low, powerful engine growled as a black sedan, the same model as before, pulled up sharply beside the plaza, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. The back door opened immediately, and Julian Hayes emerged. He wasn't just walking, he was striding his expensive overcoat, immaculate, his face set in a mask of controlled urgency and distinct displeasure. His sharp eyes instantly found his mother, then flickered dismissively, almost suspiciously over Clara. Mother Julian's voice was low, tight with authority, completely ignoring Clara. "What are you doing out here? I was told you were resting at home." "Your driver said he brought you to this area." Why Evelyn drew herself up slightly, her warmth towards Clara instantly shifting into a protective stance against her son's interrogation. "Julian, darling." She began, her tone laced with a deliberate airy lightness that nonetheless carried a subtle rebuke. "Try not to look like you're about to conduct a hostile takeover of this public bench." Clara was just returning something precious I'd lost. She gestured towards Clara. "This is the very kind young lady I was telling you about, the one who rescued me from the great technological rebellion." The other day, Julian's gaze remained fixed on Clara, sharp and analytical, missing none of the exchange. A flicker of something, annoyance, embarrassment, crossed his features at his mother's gentle teasing, but his stern demeanor barely wavered. He finally addressed Clara directly, his tone clipped and formal. "And you are?" Clara felt suddenly small under his intense scrutiny, the vast difference in their worlds palpable. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze politely. "My name is Clara, Sir Clara." Julian repeated the name, sounding cold and clinical on his tongue. He seemed about to ask another pointed question when Evelyn intervened, smoothly stepping slightly between them. "Julian, honestly, mind your manners, Clara. This is my son, Julian Hayes." She paused, then added with perhaps a touch more emphasis than necessary, "You might know his name from the building next door." Julian gave a curt nod, his expression unreadable. "Julian Hayes," he confirmed, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "CEO of Hayes Corporation." Hayes. The name echoed in the suddenly silent plaza. Hayes Corporation. The towering building she cleaned near every day. The name whispered in the hallways. CEO, this man, intense, powerful, looking at her, as if she were a speck of dust, was the Julian Hayes, and Evelyn, kind, witty Evelyn with the antique comb, was his mother. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Her mind scrambled to connect the dots. The expensive car, the subtle shift in Evelyn's demeanor, the comb itself. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. She took an involuntary step backward, the simple sandwich forgotten in her hand. Her eyes wide with dawning, horrified realization. The world tilted on its axis. "Hayes, CEO." The words slammed into Clara with the force of a physical blow. Julian Hayes, Evelyn Hayes, mother and son. The kindness, the warmth, the shared biscuit, the antique comb. It all warped under the harsh glare of this new reality. She felt exposed, foolish, like a child who had wandered into a place she didn't belong. Her cheeks burned with a mixture of shame and a bewildering sense of betrayal, though she couldn't pinpoint by whom. She just stood there, frozen in the bustling plaza, the half-eaten sandwich suddenly feeling like lead in her hand. Julian's eyes, sharp and disconcertingly perceptive, didn't leave her face. He registered the shock, the dawning comprehension, the involuntary step back. His expression remained unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. Yet Clara felt pinned by his gaze, dissected and categorized in the space of a heartbeat. Evelyn made a soft sound of distress, reaching out a hand as if to steady Clara, but unsure how to bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes." "I didn't know." Clara stammered the words, barely audible. Before Evelyn could offer reassurance, another voice cut through the charged atmosphere, sharp and laced with vindictive triumph. Brenda. She had materialized seemingly out of nowhere, her eyes gleaming with malicious opportunity, a look of faux concern plastered on her face as she addressed Julian directly, ignoring Evelyn and Clara. "Mr. Hayes." "Sir, thank goodness you're here," Brenda exclaimed, her voice pitched just loud enough for maximum effect. "I saw the whole thing. Both times." She pointed an accusatory finger at Clara, who flinched as if struck. This girl, Clara, she's been hanging around here for days trying to get attention. She deliberately targeted your mother. Sir, played nice, acted all innocent. It was obvious she was hoping for a handout, maybe trying to work some angle to get money or favors. These types, she added, lowering her voice slightly, but ensuring Julian heard, they always have an angle. You can't trust them near decent people. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and poisonous. Evelyn gasped, her face flushing with anger. Brenda, that is an outrageous lie. How dare you? Julian held up a hand, silencing both Brenda and his mother momentarily. His gaze, however, intensified on Clara, a new layer of calculation entering his eyes. Did this accusation confirm some deep-seated cynicism within him? Did he see Clara now, not as a person, but as the stereotype Brenda painted? For Clara, Brenda's words were like gasoline on the embers of her shock and humiliation. Tears welled hot and stinging, tears of hurt, of anger, of utter disbelief that her simple act could be twisted into something so vile. She saw the flicker of doubt, however small, in Julian Hayes's eyes. She saw Brenda's smug satisfaction, and something inside her snapped. The tears spilled over, tracing hot paths down her cold cheeks. But her chin lifted. Her voice, when she spoke, trembled initially but gained strength with every word, fueled by a righteous fury she didn't know she possessed. No, she said, her voice clear and ringing slightly in the suddenly quiet plaza. She looked directly at Julian Hayes, ignoring Brenda entirely. No, that is not true. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to stand tall, despite feeling like she might shatter. I helped your mother. She continued, her gaze unwavering because she was caught in the rain, because she looked lost, because she was a person who needed help. That's it. That's the only reason. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out the antique comb, holding it out. Not towards Evelyn, but towards Julian, her hand trembling slightly. I found this after she left. I kept it safe. I was hoping I would see her again, just to return it. That's all I wanted. Her voice cracked on the last words, the raw emotion evident. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who you were, and I don't want anything from either of you. Not money, not favors, nothing. The raw honesty, the palpable pain in her voice, created a stunned silence. Evelyn looked utterly distressed, tears shimmering in her own eyes now. Brenda seemed momentarily taken aback by the force of Clara's defense, her smirk faltering slightly. Julian Hayes stood motionless, his face an enigma. His eyes moved from Clara's tear-streaked face to the antique comb, trembling in her hand, to his mother's pleading expression, then back to Clara. What was he seeing? A convincing actress, as Brenda suggested, or the raw vulnerability of wounded integrity? The air crackled with unspoken questions, with judgments being weighed in the balance. The weight of his stare, the shame of the accusation, the sheer overwhelming nature of the situation crashed down on Clara. It was too much. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she wanted was to disappear, to run back to the anonymity of her life, away from these people and their complicated accusatory world. I should go, she whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving only exhaustion and a deep, aching hurt. She turned abruptly, desperate to flee the scene, to escape the scrutiny and the humiliation. She'd taken only 2 steps when his voice cut through the air behind her, sharp, commanding, stopping her dead in her tracks. Wait. Clara froze at Julian Hayes's sharp command. Wait. She couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. Her feet felt rooted to the pavement, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She didn't turn around immediately, squeezing her eyes shut for a brief second, bracing herself for What more accusations? A cold dismissal? Julian exchanged a quick, unreadable glance with his mother, then addressed Brenda. His voice, devoid of warmth, clipped and dangerously smooth. "Brenda, is it? Your shift appears to be ongoing. Return to your duties. Immediately, we will discuss your observations. Later." The implication was clear. It wasn't a suggestion. Brenda paled slightly, opened her mouth as if to protest, then visibly thought better of it. With a final resentful glare at Clara, she scurried away, her brief moment of power evaporating. Turning back to Clara, who still hadn't moved, Julian's tone softened fractionally, though it still held an edge of command. "Not here. My office is nearby. We need to talk." Evelyn stepped forward, gently. "Clara, dear. Perhaps just for a few minutes." Please, Clara felt trapped between Evelyn's soft plea and Julian's steely expectation. Numbly, hardly aware of her own movements, she allowed herself to be guided, not quite led, but certainly directed, towards the imposing entrance of the Hayes Corporation Tower. The brief walk through the opulent lobby under the curious or indifferent glances of employees felt like miles. Later that evening, back in the sparse but meticulously clean confines of her small apartment, the encounter replayed relentlessly in Clara's mind. The shock had subsided, leaving behind a dull ache of humiliation and a confusing tangle of emotions. She sat on her worn sofa, tracing the pattern on a cushion, the antique comb resting on the small table beside her. She replayed Brenda's vicious words, the sting still fresh. How could someone twist an act of simple kindness into something so ugly? Then she pictured Julian Hayes's face, his initial suspicion, the brief flicker of uncertainty during her defense, his final commanding presence. He represented a world so far removed from hers, a world of power and assumptions, where people like her were perhaps automatically suspect. And Evelyn, kind Evelyn, who unknowingly was the catalyst for this entire mess. Could she ever look at Evelyn the same way again? Now, knowing the immense wealth and power that stood behind her, warm smiles and witty remarks. Did kindness even matter when such vast gulfs existed? Clara felt a wave of weariness wash over her. Maybe Brenda was right in one sense. Maybe she didn't belong anywhere near their world. But the thought of shrinking back, of letting that accusation define her, sparked a flicker of defiance in her exhaustion. Her integrity was all she truly owned. In his own starkly modern penthouse apartment, Julian Hayes poured himself a glass of water, the city lights glittering coldly beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. He rarely brought work home, but the incident in the plaza demanded attention. He'd already reviewed the lobby security footage from the day of the storm. It clearly showed Clara's unhesitating kindness, her sharing of food, the brief, warm interaction. No sign of calculation, only spontaneity. He'd also had a rather firm conversation with his mother, whose passionate defense of Clara's character left no room for doubt. Evelyn had been deeply upset both by Brenda's accusation and by Julian's initial handling of the situation. Furthermore, a discreet check into Brenda's personnel file had revealed a pattern of minor complaints and subtle troublemaking. She hadn't lied outright before, but she clearly possessed a streak of malice fueled by envy. Julian wasn't accustomed to being wrong, especially not in his assessment of people's motives. He'd built his empire on shrewd judgments. Yet Clara's raw honesty, her tearful but dignified defense in the face of public humiliation, it had struck a chord. It contrasted sharply with the calculated sycophancy he often encountered. He felt uncomfortable. Acknowledging error wasn't his forte, but the injustice was undeniable. His mother was right. Brenda's accusation was baseless, cruel, and Clara deserved something. An apology felt insufficient, almost trite, given the power imbalance he needed to rectify the situation properly, which led him to an unconventional decision. The next afternoon there was a hesitant knock on Clara's apartment door. She opened it cautiously, her breath catching in her throat when she saw Julian Hayes standing there. He looked distinctly out of place in the narrow, dimly lit hallway of her modest building, his expensive suit seeming too sharp, his posture too rigid for the surroundings. He shifted slightly, his gaze taking in the simple hallway, a flicker of awkwardness crossing his usually composed features. This was clearly not his natural habitat, Miss Clara. He began, his voice softer than yesterday, less commanding. "May I have a moment?" Hesitantly, Clara stepped aside, allowing him into her small living area. It was tiny, furnished simply, but immaculately clean. Julian stood near the door, looking slightly unsure of where to put himself, a stark contrast to the man who dominated boardrooms. "Mr. Hayes," Clara said quietly, her guard firmly up. "What do you want?" He cleared his throat. "I wanted to address what happened yesterday. Firstly, the employee who made those accusations. Brenda has been dealt with appropriately. Her behavior was unacceptable." He paused, meeting Clara's wary gaze. "Secondly, your reaction, your explanation. I believe you. The security footage confirms your initial interaction with my mother was exactly as you both described. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an admission." Clara nodded stiffly. "Waiting. My mother feels strongly that we owe you something for the distress caused." Julian continued navigating the unfamiliar territory of personal amends. "I understand your financial situation might be challenging. I would like to offer you financial compensation for no." Clara interrupted her voice, quiet but firm, her chin lifting again. The offer, however well-intentioned, felt like charity, like pity money. It stung. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. But no, I told you yesterday I don't want anything." Helping your mother wasn't a transaction. Julian seemed momentarily taken aback by the swift refusal. He studied her for a moment, seeing the unwavering pride in her eyes. He adjusted his approach. "I understand," he said slowly. "However, my mother also mentioned she was impressed by your manner, your quick thinking, and frankly, your defense yesterday showed considerable fortitude." He hesitated. "Hayes Corporation occasionally has entry-level openings in administration support staff. Its demanding work requires discretion, efficiency." He paused again, gauging her reaction. It occurred to me that, perhaps, an opportunity might be more appropriate than compensation. He wasn't offering it as charity now, but framing it as a potential match of her perceived character to a need within his company. Clara stared at him, surprised by the shift. This wasn't pity. This was a chance. A real, tangible opportunity, far removed from mops and buckets, a path towards something better for herself, for Leo. But it came directly from him, born out of that awful confrontation. Could she accept it? Did it still feel tainted? "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Hayes," she said carefully, choosing her words. "But I wouldn't want a job simply because you feel obligated, or because of yesterday. If I were to accept any position, it would have to be because you genuinely believe I could do the work, and I would expect to be treated like any other employee I would need to earn my place." Julian met her gaze, a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes this time. He saw her terms were not about money, but about dignity. That seems fair. He conceded. It would be a trial period, naturally. Standard procedure. The HR department would handle the formal process. But he added a hint of his usual decisiveness, returning, "The initial opportunity is there, if you want it." Clara looked around her small apartment, then back at the powerful man standing awkwardly within it. It was a huge risk stepping into his world, but wasn't staying put also a risk condemning herself to a life of scraping by? She thought of Leo, of her own deferred dreams. Maybe this was how things changed. Not through pity, but through an unexpected hard-won chance. She took a deep breath. "Okay, Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice steadier now. "I accept the opportunity. On a trial basis, I'll do my best to earn it." A tentative, fragile understanding settled between them. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with potential challenges, but for the first time since the storm, a sliver of cautious hope broke through the clouds. Stepping into the bustling, sophisticated world of Hayes Corporation as an employee, even on a trial basis, felt like entering a different dimension for Clara. The first few days were a whirlwind of unfamiliar faces, complex phone systems, and software programs that seemed designed to intimidate. Assigned to an entry-level administrative support role, she was acutely aware of the hushed curiosity that sometimes followed her down the corridors, the whispers likely fueled by Brenda's inevitable gossip before her departure. Clara later heard through the office grapevine that Brenda had been transferred to a remote branch following a formal investigation, a consequence Julian Hayes had apparently enacted, swiftly and decisively. But Clara didn't let the whispers or the initial challenges deter her. She arrived early, stayed late when necessary, and tackled every task, no matter how mundane, with meticulous care and a quiet determination. She asked questions, listened intently, and learned quickly, her natural intelligence shining through the initial lack of corporate experience. She organized chaotic filing systems, handled tedious data entry with surprising accuracy, and even managed to troubleshoot a notoriously temperamental printer that had baffled seasoned assistants. She wasn't just doing the job, she was mastering it, driven by the promise she'd made to herself. She would earn this. Julian Hayes maintained a professional distance, interacting with her only when necessary through formal channels. Yet Clara occasionally caught him observing her, a brief, assessing glance as she efficiently handled a call, a quick nod when her direct supervisor praised her progress in a team meeting. There was no overt praise from him, but she sensed a shift from the initial suspicion to a grudging, then growing respect. He seemed to be quietly evaluating, letting her prove herself on her own merit. As agreed. She also noticed small changes around the office, a renewed emphasis on respectful communication in internal memos, a slightly more accessible process for raising workplace concerns. Perhaps she thought her ordeal had inadvertently planted a seed for positive change. Evelyn, however, was a frequent and welcome presence. She'd often arrange to meet Clara for a quick coffee during her break, or sometimes appear near closing time with a small parcel of pastries from her favorite bakery. Their friendship blossomed, built on the foundation of that first rainy day encounter. Evelyn offered encouragement, shared stories, and provided a warm counterpoint to the sometimes impersonal corporate environment. "You know," Clara Evelyn remarked one afternoon, over tea, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "Julian actually mentioned how organized the departmental records have become since you started. High praise, indeed, coming from him. He usually only notices when things go wrong." She chuckled. "I told him, efficiency is just another word for common sense, something he could use a bit more of outside the boardroom." Clara laughed, feeling a comfortable ease with Evelyn. She cherished He just expects everything to run perfectly. Precisely, which is why. Evelyn added, leaning slightly closer. He's probably quite relieved you're here. Though he'd never admit it so plainly. The 3-month trial period drew to a close. Clara felt a nervous flutter, but also a quiet confidence. She had worked incredibly hard, proven her capabilities, and conducted herself with unwavering integrity. The official notification came via email from Human Resources, followed by a brief formal meeting with her direct supervisor. The trial was successful. She was being offered a permanent position as an administrative assistant. A wave of profound relief washed over Clara, so potent it almost brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't just a job, it was validation. It was stability for her and Leo. It was a future she had built, step by painstaking step, from a single act of kindness on a rainy day. It was peace hard-earned and deeply appreciated. Months later, Clara was a familiar and respected member of her team. She moved through the Hayes Corporation building, not with the hesitant uncertainty of her first days, but with a quiet confidence that came from knowing her worth. Her life was still modest, but the constant grinding worry had lessened. Leo was doing well in school, proud of his big sister working in the tall, shiny building. One crisp autumn afternoon, Julian Hayes happened to walk past Clara's workstation, just as she was expertly navigating a complex scheduling conflict involving multiple executives. She handled it with calm diplomacy and efficiency, finding a solution that satisfied everyone. As she hung up the phone, she looked up and saw him standing nearby. He met her gaze, and for the first time offered a small, almost imperceptible but genuine smile. He simply nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of her competence, and continued on his way. Later that day, Clara met Evelyn for their now regular Friday afternoon tea at a small cafe nearby. "You seem particularly cheerful today," Evelyn observed, pouring the tea. Clara smiled, recounting the small, silent exchange with Julian. It wasn't much, she concluded, but it felt good. Like I finally belonged there because of me, not because of how I started. She then shared a humorous anecdote about trying to explain the concept of synergizing deliverables from a memo she'd typed to her bewildered brother. Leo Evelyn laughed heartily. "Oh, darling Clara," she said, her eyes warm with affection. "You always belonged. It just took some people," she added with a pointed little glance, as if Julian might overhear a little longer, to see it. As Clara sipped her tea, a sense of quiet contentment settled over her. The journey hadn't been easy. There might still be scars, reminders of the prejudice and assumptions she'd faced. But she had navigated the storm, held on to her integrity, and found not riches, perhaps, but something far more valuable earned respect, genuine connection, and the quiet, steady peace of a future built by her own capable hands, all stemming from a simple act of kindness offered freely without expectation on a rainy afternoon. And so Clara's journey reminds us how a single, unassuming act of kindness can send ripples out into the world, quietly dismantling walls we build between each other. Doesn't it make you wonder how often we might misjudge the depth of a person based on the surface? We see, perhaps true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or job titles, but in the richness of our integrity and the courage to connect with simple human decency. Clara's quiet strength, Evelyn's persistent warmth, and even Julian's eventual willingness to see beyond status. These moments echo experiences perhaps not so different from our own lives. This story left us thinking deeply, and perhaps it resonated with you too. We'd love to hear your perspective down in the comments. What moment in Clara's story touched you the most? And why we also truly value your feedback as we strive to bring you meaningful stories. Was there anything in today's narrative, or how it was told, that you particularly connected with, or perhaps suggestions you have for how we can improve in the future? Please share your thoughts below. Your insights are invaluable to us. If Clara's journey of resilience and earned respect moved you, please give this video a thumbs up, as it truly helps us reach more people. And if you believe this message might resonate with someone, please consider sharing it. Of course, if you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next exploration into the heart of human experience. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today and sharing in this story. Until next time, take care and remember the quiet power of kindness.